Hi everyone, when you are watching this particular video, it means that you are entering week number 5, that is to cover the topic history and intercultural communication. Okay, when you really talk about history and intercultural communication, you might find it odd to find a chapter about history in a book on intercultural and you think why do we need to learn about history, but to reflect back and to see who we are today. We need to reflect back to our past, and the past is an important facet of intercultural communication itself. So what I'm going to go through with you today is basically concepts, simple concepts for this particular chapter that I'll be explaining right now. Okay, so the first one, we will go to the subchapter political, intellectual, and social histories. So, political histories defined as written histories that focus on political events. So, when we talk about in our society, all this political landscape will be going on when we are in a society. So, for example, the recent case in Malaysia, whereby the seventh Prime Minister, which is Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, resigned as the Prime Minister, and it made like a chaotic political landscape in Malaysia. And at the time, the king actually appointed him when finding the new current prime minister. He appointed Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad as the interim prime minister, which makes history whereby the history of political landscape in Malaysia, there is no such there to have a interim prime minister is it's quite rare to actually hear because it never happened before. So yeah, that would be one particular incident. The second concept would be intellectual histories in society, whereby written histories that focus on the development of ideas. And the third one will be social histories, whereby written histories that focus on everyday life experiences of various groups in the past where we have. So to actually look back what had happened before. There's so many contexts that you can actually look into. Okay, we go to the next one, which is family histories. So, family histories, when we think of who we are, family histories of defined as histories of individual families that are typically passed down through oral stories. So, for example, you and me, we will have a different set of grandparents. Okay, for example, and the backstories that our grandparents have are much different between you and me because we come from different families. So sometimes to actually know who you are, it is being passed by stories by by your grandmother, and then sometimes you heard from your mother, then you want to ask your grandmother, you ask your grandmother if she's still around, and so forth. So that is family history, and family histories occur at the same time as other histories, but on a more personal level. So other histories will happen around you, but you will actually, which is much more closer to you, your family. So family histories will be a personal level to you, which anything that happens in your family you really care about, you know. And how might knowledge about your family change your feelings about who you are? Okay, I would like to relate an example of um Grey's Anatomy. If anybody have watched Grey's Anatomy yet. Oh no, do you guys know what Grey's Anatomy is? Okay, Grey's Anatomy or Grey's Anatomy. Okay, it's a TV series from the US covering all doctors in a hospital, how they do their how they do their residencies and so forth, and how they become uh, a surgeon and so forth. Okay, so that there is a particular episode by the name of Dr. Joe. Okay, Dr. Joe, Dr. Joe, this would be a woman. She did not know where did she came from. She come from a foster family, so she wanted to know who she is. So she go and look for her mother, and at the end of the day, when she looked for her mother and she found her mother, and she was wondering why her mother did not want to actually raise her up, and her mother actually revealed to her that that she, her mother, was pregnant with Dr. Joe due to due to rape. She was being raped. Her mother was being raped. So Dr. Joe is an offspring of a rape case. So that actually made Dr. Joe felt so humiliated. So she becomes so depressed and so forth in the upcoming episodes. So sorry if you guys are watching Grey's Anatomy, that is spoiler alert in episode season 20 something. Okay, that is example of that. And we go to the next one, which is national histories. When we talk about national histories, is which country that you are coming from. So it defines as a body of knowledge based on past events that influence a country's development. National history includes its great events and figures as well. National history gives us a shared notion of who we are and solidifies our sense of nationhood. So whether you come from a country, from where do you come from? From Malaysia, from Japan, from the United States, from Africa, and so forth. Yeah. So what happened in your country actually, is a foundation of who you are today as well. Okay, and we go to the next one, which is cultural group histories. When we talk about national histories, we go a little bit narrowed down with cultural group, whereby in a country there is a lot of cultural group, whereby cultural group histories is the history of each cultural group within a nation that includes, for example, the history of where the group is originated, why the people migrated, and how they came to develop and maintain their cultural lives. So when we talk about cultural group histories, let's take an example of Malaysia. We come from a multiracial society whereby back then Malaysia is well known uh, uh, for trading purposes, and a lot of countries came in and stayed for good, which is really great. That is what Malaysia is right now. So there are people coming from China, from India, and that would be an example of cultural group histories. That's why we live in a multiracial society today. And we go a little bit on history and identity. Histories as stories. So when we talk about history, can we actually escape our history? So telling stories is fundamental to the human experience. Histories are stories we use to make sense of who we are and who we think others are. So sometimes when you grow up, you ask your mother, have when I was 5, how was I? How was I? Am I an easy girl to actually deal with? So you want to see your history. Okay, so sometimes in unfortunate cases, there'll be children coming from broken families, for example, people who are involved with murder cases, their parent involved with murder cases, or their father is a serial killer, for example, and to become a child of a serial killer, can we actually escape that history that we have in our blood, for example? And I want to give an example of Pablo Escobar as well. If anybody watch Netflix, which is Narcos season 1 and 2. That is on Pablo Escobar. Can you imagine? Pablo Escobar had two children, one boy, one girl, and how even though Pablo Escobar has passed away, has died such long time ago, can their children actually escape the history of their father? So so history is stories. Can we actually do that? So yeah, a good question to reflect. Okay, and we cannot really escape our history even if we fail to recognize it or try to suppress it. So sometimes it's better to embrace it and move on. I always think it in that kind of way. So, for example, if let's take an example of if you have a relationship and you have so many failed relationships, and you met a great guy, and you want to work things out with him, but sometimes it sometimes or something put you back, and you are scared to actually make a commitment, so you are afraid that because you have a history of bad relationships, will this one be bad as well? So sometimes you have to embrace it that what happened in the past will stay in the past. So what you do is embrace your past and move on to become a better person. Okay, always remember that. Okay, by ignoring history, we sometimes come to the wrong-headed conclusions about others, and that reinforce particular stereotypes. Again, as an example, if we come across Pablo Escobar's son, it doesn't mean that Pablo Escobar's son is bad. Okay, his father was. Okay, so you have to actually really know the person, know the history of the person, to actually know the overall view of the individual. Okay, and then we go to the next one, which is non-mainstream histories. Okay, so people from non-mainstream cultural groups often struggle to retain their histories. Okay, so some non-mainstream histories are absent histories because sometimes, for example, let's say if you are in the US, the main culture will be whites, but there'll be African as well. African as well. There'll be other non-mainstream cultural groups, that did not make it into the written document. Okay, and which is defined as hidden histories, like right here. Okay, so the histories are hidden from or forgotten by the mainstream representation of past events. Sometimes there are so many cultures and there are so many things to actually include in history. So it's normal for one, okay, to actually fall out and to become an absent history. Okay, and these are definitions, simple definition that you can actually browse through. Ethnic histories are defined as the histories of ethnic groups, and racial histories are the histories of non-mainstream racial groups. Okay, and we go to the next one. Okay, next concept will be gender histories. Histories will be the histories of cultural conventions of men and women are created, okay, maintained and or altered. Okay, for example, number one, okay, women did not obtain the right to vote until 1920. So their participation in nation's political history was restricted. So women are being seen mainly back then in 1920s as uh, you know as a sex object mainly. Women are supposed to actually serve men. Women did not have the power to actually control an office. So women's power, the importance and significance of women have evolved up till today, whereby women can actually hold positions. Okay, so to actually, look back and value what we have today, we must look at our histories. Okay, and how is contemporary life today influenced by gender history? You still think that a woman uh, could not, you know, be a CEO, a man should, so how does that influence your perception? Okay, share with me in the Facebook group, or yeah, email me. Okay. And we go to the next one, which is sexual orientation histories. It is defined as the historical experiences of gays and lesbians. An example would be an Amsterdam monument to remember that gays and lesbians were also victims of the Nazi Holocaust. So try and Google Nazi Holocaust and share in the Facebook group, and we can have a discussion on that one. I won't go more on this example. Let's take it into a Facebook group discussion and do that. Okay, that's number one. Please remind me on that. And second of all would be about Abraham Lincoln's sexuality. So Abraham Lincoln's sexuality, surprise, it is being debatable as well in the United States. So if we do not listen to or cannot hear the voices of others, we will miss important historical lessons and create enormous misunderstandings about who we are. And to actually, enlighten you. Gays and lesbians has been a part of the society since back then. It's also in most religion books that gays and lesbians exist and coexist in our particular world. Okay, so I can remember if anybody. I want to take an example of the recent movie, Bohemian Rhapsody. Okay, Bohemian Rhapsody would be a story on Freddie Mercury, the lead singer of Queen, uh, whereby he was gay, and he was being penalized by being gay, but and then he actually pass away due to pneumonia because he had a lot of relationships with random strangers, if I'm not mistaken. If when I read through and browse through books and websites, yeah. So back then, Freddie Mercury did not came out during his era as being gay because it was not being legalized then, but now it is. So, history, to actually appreciate of who we are today and our sexual orientation is we have to recap back. So try and, embrace who you are and what you have become, and remember the history. Okay. And the next one would be diasporic histories. Diaspora is defined as a massive migration, often caused by war, famine, enslavement, or persecution that results in the disappearance of a unified group. Diasporic histories are the histories of the ways in which international cultural groups were created through transnational migration, slavery, religious crusades, or other historical forces. So diasporic histories, sometimes we are being, people migrate in our country, and then we have people who come have as slaves in our country as well. So there's so many histories in one particular nation. You can't actually, you know, restrict a history of a nation only to one particular context. It can be many. Okay, and we must be careful to distinguish between ways that these connections are helpful to hurt or hurtful to intercultural communication. By studying intercultural communication, I would like to emphasize you sometimes it can be sensitive, whereby we will tend to touch on racial context, religious context, and so forth. But you want to draw the line between helpful or hurtful, or you want to know an information. So try to be sensitive between one another when you ask questions about other people's culture or other people's history and so forth. Okay, and we go to colonial histories. Okay, colonial histories are histories that legitimate international invasion and annexation. So the first one, many nations did not confine themselves within their own borders, whereby they go to other people, countries to invade and to actually, get their influence so they can become a world, the super world power. Okay, for example, back then, Britain is well known with colonizing countries. Okay, and colonialism is significant. Sorry, the second point is because the nation, when and invade a country is because they have limited resources, and that is the two most important thing that you should know: overpopulation and limited resources. That's why countries go and invade other countries. Okay, the second one would be colonialism is significant in determining language. We do not freely choose the languages we speak. We must learn the language of the societies into which we are born. So, for example, because Malaysia has been colonialized by Britain once upon a time, so that's why we have to speak. A part of us is saying that English is an important language. English is a second language. That is what Malaysia is right now. So through colonial histories is why we speak English as a second language. Okay? And the third one would be post-colonialism, which is an intellectual, political, and a cultural movement calling for the independence of colonized states and the liberation from colonialist ways of thinking. So we have Malaysia, for example, have reached post-colonialism whereby we have gained independence and so forth. So in struggling with the colonial past, people devise ways of confronting the past. Studying intercultural communication considered that post-colonialism theories, sorry, not just colonial conditions, but why those conditions are what they are and how they can be undone and redone. So histories are histories. They could not be redo, and we have to move on to become a better nation or an individual or a society. Okay, and we head on to our last section for this particular lecture, which is socio-economic class histories. It's important to actually learn why we have different socio-economic class. So socio-economic class histories are bodies of knowledge relating to a group's relationship to social class and economic forces. Okay, number one will be economic class inspires some migration. So, for example, here impoverished Irish immigrated to the US. Second one, wealthy can buy citizenship in Canada. Wealthy fled Cuban Revolution. Tried to read something about that as well. Russian Revolution in 1970. Wealthy moved to Paris. So socio-economic class distinctions often overlook in understanding historical migrations and acculturation of groups around the world. So sometimes when we talk about social class and economy, it's always about the elites, the working class, the middle class, and then the lower class of the society. So that's for example in India. Okay, so if you are in India, I've seen a documentary whereby if you live in the slums, uh, if you live in the slums now, and if you trace back your history, most probably your father have lived in a slum, your grandfather did, and your great great grandfather did, and it has become, that is a socio-economic class history. To actually change that, you have to work really really hard and get out from the slum and become someone. So you have to go through universities to change that history that your family has, for example. Okay, so that is it for chapter number 5, history and intercultural communication. A few of concepts that we have learned in this particular chapter is what is political history, what is cultural group history, what is national history, what is socio-economic class history. So the most important part for this particular chapter is just to remember the concepts, and there's so many types of history because we're living in a big country, and there's so many things that made up who we are today. Might it be our socio-economic, might it be our cultural, might it be our national history, might it be our political history, or social history, and so forth. So there's so many histories that made up a person or a society. So that is what we are today. So that is the G's of chapter 5, which is history and intercultural communication. So that is a wrap for chapter 5 and week 5. If you have any questions, as usual, please drop me a question in our Facebook group. I'll be glad to answer it. Or not, you can actually text me when you finish this particular video. If you don't understand, you can ask me questions, no problem at all. I will invite you. And remember to actually do your Anu culture report by this time around. You should have your partner ready, and don't forget to actually do your tutorial under this section, week 5. Okay, everybody, that is all for this particular video. Signing off. Be safe, stay safe, and good day. Bye.